Welcome to the Practitioner's Rise podcast. I'm your host, Haley Krajewski, marketing strategist, natural health advocate, and a mom on a mission. Each week, I sit down with natural health and wellness practitioners from around the country who are doing incredible life-changing work. We go deep on the things you've been Googling at midnight, share real tips and resources, and my hope is that you walk away feeling more informed, more empowered, and more confident in the choices you're making for yourself and your family. Because I fully believe that when practitioners rise, entire communities rise with them. So let's dive in. Today's guest understands chronic illness from both sides of the table. Tammie Delveaux is a functional nutrition therapy practitioner, board-certified holistic nutritionist, and founder of Belly Love Holistic Wellness, where she helps individuals and family uncover the root causes of chronic illness through food-first nutrition, functional testing, bioenergetic testing, and lifestyle support. But her expertise wasn't born from textbooks. It was born from over a decade of debilitating pain, unanswered questions, and a body that kept throwing curveballs. Celiac disease, Crohn's disease, I'm probably going to butcher this, ankylosing spondylitis, Lyme's disease, mold toxicity, POTS, SIBO, and eventually a double hip replacement, the physical consequence of years of unmanaged inflammation. So what makes Tammie's story remarkable isn't that she just survived all of it, but that she refused to accept a lifetime of medication management as her only option. She really wanted to understand what was driving her diseases and then do something about it. So today she's in full remission and has made it her mission to show others that the same is possible for them. So Tammie, welcome to the show. I am so excited to dive into this conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me. That intro made me emotional, so I'm kind of tearing.
Oh, I know. The other day, I think I started tearing up on an episode. So if we start crying, it's okay. It just makes it just shows how just empowering this can be and how powerful everything can be. So when people meet you today, Tammie, they see someone thriving, running a business, helping others heal, full of purpose, right? But that's not where your story starts, as I alluded to in the introduction. So if you want to, can you take us back to the version of you who was really just trying to survive?
Absolutely. Yes. So for 10 years, I spent a life of very debilitating pain, and it was a very confusing and frustrating time for me. The pain came about 6 months after I graduated from college. So it was right after I was kind of finishing up my college career. I remember that last semester of college, I started having really terrible runny stools. And I do have to preface, we're probably going to talk about poop a lot. So hopefully,
It's okay. It's okay. I have 4 boys, so I talk about poop all the time.
so the stools were very runny and they wouldn't stop. And so from 2010 onward until about 2018, I had diarrhea constantly. My stools were never formed, and that was really my life. That was normal for me. And then came the pain. It started with just a sharp twinge in my lower back and right hip. I went to the doctor and they said it was probably just a pinched nerve. And then eventually, an orthopedic surgeon looked at an MRI and labeled my pain as degenerative disc disease with bulging discs. But the funny thing is, when you're young, and I was like 20 at the time, you don't pay much mind to those things. And so I went on with my life. And then years passed, and I went to see a rheumatologist. And this was far before I was diagnosed officially. And I was having fainting spells. So he ran some blood tests and determined that I had iron deficiency anemia, meaning that I had such low iron numbers that I was fainting. And I didn't realize it at the time, but that was because I wasn't absorbing any of my nutrients because I was pooping them all out all the time. Meanwhile, I was getting sicker and sicker. And then finally in 2018, I decided enough was enough when I had a gallstone that was lodged in my main liver bile duct. And I needed an emergency procedure to remove it because I was so jaundiced and it was obstructing my bile flow. And they told me I could have died. So just months later, they removed my gallbladder and then they took a biopsy of my small intestine. I was diagnosed with celiac. So when I went gluten free for the first time in my life, that was the first time I ever started to care about my health. Before, I never had to really care. And all the while, even after being diagnosed with celiac, my relentless back and hip pain never went away. In fact, it kept getting worse. There were times where I would scream out in pain. I couldn't walk. I was bedridden. I couldn't go to work because stepping down on my feet would shoot red hot searing pain up my body. Eventually, it got to the point where I couldn't breathe, which now I know is called air hunger. And I also had costochondritis, which again, I had to figure out on my own what that was. But that means inflammation of the intercostal muscle tissue of the rib cage. And I was getting steroid shots all the time in my back like crazy. I was eating Aleve, ibuprofen, and Tylenol like it was candy. I went to every doctor, every physical therapist, every pain specialist, massage therapist, acupuncturist, chiropractors, Reiki specialist. No one could help me. I did feel like my life was hanging on by a thread. And honestly, sometimes I did not want to live. The pain was so horrific. However, when I look back on this time of my life, I lived a much simpler life than I do now, one where I was not aware of all the items in my environment that could cause my body to push myself into the autoimmunity spectrum. I ate whatever I wanted. I drank very frequently. I overworked myself. I didn't move my body. I added beauty products to my body. I used fragrances and cleaned with chemicals that added a total toxic burden to my being, all of which were leading to a cluster of autoimmune diagnoses.
Oh my word. You have went through so much. And over that 10 years, right? An entire decade of just severe debilitating pain before you got answers. What did that actually feel like living through?
Mhm. Yes, I mean, it felt like a movie. It felt like it wasn't really my life, and it felt like being someone who was young, that was really where I couldn't believe that this was happening to me.
Yes. And I really would love to dive into kind of each one of these things that we're talking about, right? That I mentioned in the intro, because I think I'm sure some of our listeners may be also dealing with this too and thinking like there's not any other option for me when we know now that there is, right? So your first actual diagnosis you said was celiac disease in 2018. And so I think there's still this misconception out there about celiac for people who think it just means avoiding gluten. But what is it doing to your body? What did healing look like for you? And I think just maybe share more about what celiac disease is.
So, gluten can affect so many different organ systems in the body, not just the digestive tract. Of course, gluten is one of the major culprits of what's called intestinal hyperpermeability or leaky gut. And if you are celiac, that means that the body is attacking itself in the small intestine. So, with a celiac patient, which is autoimmune, the body attacks the villi of the small intestine, which are like the large fibers of a plush carpet or like the fingers that absorb nutrients in the body. And this is why people who are sensitive to gluten are so malnourished. But what's really important to make the distinction is that there are far more people who are not celiac who are sensitive to gluten. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But celiac is the autoimmune form of being sensitive to gluten and can be shown on a lab test with transglutaminase immunoglobulin A antibodies. And it's also important to note that only 50% of people who are celiac and should be diagnosed are asymptomatic. So they don't even know that they are celiac and they don't even have symptoms. So they're living a life and they don't even know how severely sensitive they are and they're getting sicker from it. And it's also crazy to know that it's not common practice in the medical field to test people for celiac disease, even if they come in with digestive issues, both constipation and diarrhea, or if someone is given an IBS diagnosis. So, like I said, the most shocking thing about gluten is that many people, if not most people who are sensitive to gluten, are not celiac. In fact, there are many people who are IgE sensitive, meaning they're highly allergic. And currently, right now, there's not many tests in the conventional medicine model that will help determine this factor. So many people have to go outside of that model to get testing from the functional perspective. You can go in the regular medicine model for a celiac test. And if it comes back negative, because they're only testing that one type of antibody, a person will be told, you're not celiac, therefore you don't have to avoid gluten. But a person will have to, like I said, maybe meet with a practitioner outside of the medical model, like a functional practitioner, and they can try to do lab testing like the wheat zoomer test, which is a great test that tests a broad spectrum of antibodies that the body makes against gluten and wheat. You could do a stool test like the GI map, which tests zonulin levels, which is a marker of leaky gut, and anti-gliadin antibodies, or you can use bioenergetic testing, which is an easy and quick and affordable option to find out if you're sensitive to gluten. But gluten affects many different areas of the body. I like to break it down into six major mechanisms. So it affects increased intestinal permeability, immune system activation, microbiome disruption, nutrient depletion and malabsorption, inflammation and oxidative stress, and autoimmune cross reactivity. So those six mechanisms can ripple outward into virtually every body system. So brain, hormones, skin, thyroid, joints, detoxification pathways, blood sugar regulation, and immune function. And it's also important to know that wheat today is very different than it was a long time ago, like in the Bible.
And that's what I was going to ask because I feel like, do you see so many more people now being gluten sensitive or celiac than before because of how it's changed?
Yeah. And we see a lot of kiddos, a lot of kiddos. And if someone has unexplained symptoms, and it doesn't even have to be digestive, it could be that there could be a gluten component. It's not usually the only component, but definitely it's a contributing factor because it's putting gasoline on the fire and it's preventing people from healing. And we don't grow our grains anymore. They often will sit and lose nutrition. They develop mold and mycotoxins. They're bleached, they're stripped of protein and fiber, and they're fortified with synthetic vitamins that are not bioavailable to the body. And wheat is also sprayed with glyphosate, which is pesticide. So the wheat grain today is bred as well to have more gluten molecules, which makes it more antigenic to the body. And it's also genetically modified to be pest resistant and weather resistant. So I like to say it's now more human resistant.
Yes. And so I know this might be going off tangent a little bit, but if someone's hearing this and they're like, "Oh my gosh, like what have I been eating?" Like you said before, it was maybe more simple when you didn't know all the things that were in our food. Um, but if somebody's hearing that and wants to like, I know we started making our own bread and now I just started buying the organic gluten free, but how do we know what flours are actually good and have those bioavailable ingredients in them?
Yeah, sure. And even if you're someone who's not sensitive to gluten, but needs like a better quality, like everybody needs better quality bread, period, even if you're not sensitive to gluten, because those zonulin levels inside the body are elevated regardless if you're gluten free or not. Like everyone in our modern world is struggling with leaky gut from all the toxins and stress levels. And there's lots of contributing factors. But if you're not sensitive to gluten, and you want to make sure that you are providing good nutrients for your family and for your body, I have a lot of clients who are getting their own wheat berries, and
Mm.
I would recommend you get them organic and then grinding them themselves and then making bread themselves. Because if you grind the wheat immediately and then make bread from it, you are going to get much higher fiber, much higher protein, much higher nutrient absorption, and it's actually going to be much better for you. It's also not going to have such as high of a high glycemic index as lots of processed breads. It's not going to spike your blood sugar as much. And so that, I think, although that's a lot of work for people, but if people are interested in that, I think that's highly possible. You can order wheat grains online. You can get them from in Fall Creek. You can get them from what's that? Weavers. You can get
Oh,
them.
yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So that would be for someone who is not sensitive to gluten. But if you are sensitive to gluten, or if you're even just wondering, like, hey, I have a lot of gut issues, you could just focus on, I always tell my clients, just focus on eating whole foods for a while. So just focus on eating some good quality meats, good quality fruits, good quality veggies, and even eggs if you know you're not sensitive to it, some good quality fats, and just stay away from some of the starches and sugars for a while and see if that calms down inflammation. And if it does, then that's a signal to your body that that potentially was contributing to the inflammation that is going on in your body.
I was mind blown when I learned that a bread machine can like do it all for you. So when I learned this, where it literally like you put in the ingredients, it mixes, it bakes, it does it all, I was like, I don't know why I was mind blown, but that has made life so much easier because it literally takes me 10 minutes to put the ingredient in and then we have a fresh loaf of bread. And with six of us in our family, we can go through that in a day. And buying gluten-free bread, which was not, it still had all those other things in it, like you're saying, was not helping the family. So I just wanted to throw that out for there for anyone like, I don't have time to make my own bread. Like, this is pretty awesome.
Yeah, awesome, Haley. And I didn't even really know that. Do you want to share what are some brands of those bread makers that people can research that they could use in their homes?
And I totally would, but I don't actually. I can't tell you, I can't pronounce the name of my bread maker, but I just went on Facebook Marketplace and some gal was like, I tried it and didn't use it. So she was selling it and I got it from her, but I know they're available everywhere. But I put the wet ingredients together, the dry ingredients, and I throw them in and it's good to go. And it's 2.5, I think 2 hours and 22 minutes is what it's timed for, but a lot of them have a gluten-free setting that you can put it in and it just makes it for you. So like for me, I was mind blown, but it has been such a lifesaver. And now if like I make our own sandwich buns, I just mix it in there, take it out, and then let them rise and put them in the oven. So it can do a lot. It's pretty cool.
That's cool.
Yes. And then one more question before we move on is you had mentioned getting the wheat berries, right? And you would suggest organic versus non organic. Do you want to just share a little bit more about why organic?
Yes. So a lot of people, so I do a lot of presentations across the community with a lot of different demographics. I present for families that have grown up on farms for a long time, and I present for young people, and I present for different age groups. In some communities, a misconception about organic isn't really real. Organic is not perfect. There are definitely some holes and some improvements that we can do. And definitely for the companies that are part of the organic label, it is expensive for them to be able to be certified organic. But for a consumer, it's one of the best things we can do to try and weed through all of the noise that's out there. And so when you're purchasing organic, you want to make sure that you're to save money. For fruits and vegetables, you can use the Dirty Dozen. The Environmental Working Group website has a wonderful list every year that they come out with of the 12 fruits and vegetables that have the most pesticides. But as far as gluten goes in our country and the wheat grain itself, it is one of the most highly sprayed products in our country, in our world to date. And
Well,
so there's a lot about glyphosate right now in the health space. And glyphosate is just one pesticide. There are other pesticides, but glyphosate is very harmful to the body. And it's as if it's an antibiotic. So it's working in the body and it literally decimates everything. And what happens is those grains, they uptake those pesticides in their DNA. So there's no way to get them out. There's no way to wash them. It's a part of the actual molecular makeup of that grain. And that is, some experts say, one of the leading causes of why people, especially in America, are so sensitive to gluten and wheat and not in other places of the world, like in Europe.
I actually listened to a podcast the other day on the glyphosate, and I was like, just kind of mind blown. And then also it leads you down a rabbit hole. Like, there are things that we should be doing to help our farmers to get back to regenerative farming. And, there's so many layers of soil. And like, it's just, yeah, we could go on forever, but how much healthier we could be in America if there was just less things sprayed on and put into our food. And yes, we could go down a whole rabbit hole of that. 100%. But just being cognizant of like just even looking at the labels. And I know we'll get into that, but especially like you said for gluten, I did not know that it was one of the most highly sprayed crops. I also just learned that about potatoes as well, that that's also very highly sprayed. So okay, let's go on because I want to make sure that we get through a lot of this today. But in the introduction, I also nodded to Crohn's disease. And so I think a lot of people hear Crohn's and think it's something you manage for life. What has your experience taught you that a lot of people don't know yet? And where are you with it today?
Right. So the presentation of Crohn's disease is much more than just inflammatory bowel disease. Again, we are told that once we are diagnosed, there is nothing we can do but wait for our colon to get so diseased that it has to be removed and a colostomy bag is put in. Or unfortunately, the end result could be colorectal cancer. But again, that is absolutely not our story. It doesn't have to be our story. And there's so much more that we can do to help support and stop Crohn's disease from taking over our life. So I want to highlight some of the things that I see in practice with my clients, but I also have seen in my own personal body. So the number one issue is mold mycotoxins. So when we get exposed to mold, it can either be a current exposure or a previous one, which means we become the moldy building. The mycotoxins, which are the toxins mold species spit out when they feel threatened, are the toxic part that we breathe in, and it can make us sick. And some of the more susceptible people, like myself, than others, might be more sensitive, but actually, many people are sensitive to mold and they just don't know it, and their symptoms will manifest differently in every person. Mold can affect the brain, the nervous system, the reproductive systems, the immune system, the digestive system, the endocrine system, which is like our hormonal system, cardiovascular system, lymphatic system, limbic system, you name it, pretty much mold can affect it. And so what happens with IBD is we breathe it in, we drink it, or we consume it from food. And the mycotoxins, the mold, and the fungal species in the body gets harbored a lot of times in the gut, and it's hard for the body to remove it. So, however, the body is trying so hard to remove these little toxins. They're so small, the particles are, that they can get anywhere in the body. So they're lipophilic and hydrophilic, which means they can flow through the lymph and the blood, but they can also pass through the phospholipid bilayer, which is the fatty cellular membrane. So, our large intestine is the final holding place before the rectum to convert and use our nutrients. The liver binds up and repackages toxins to prepare them for elimination through the intestines. And what happens with mold and inflammatory bowel disease is our beautiful body tries to remove it, but it gets stuck in the intestinal tract. So, what happens is our wonderful and resourceful body reabsorbs any excess bile in the intestines that's not excreted from our stool. And many of those mycotoxins are still in the bile. And what happens is our intestinal lining ends up getting ripped, essentially. So every time that recirculation happens, so our body tries again to eliminate the mycotoxins by pulling them through the process, detoxifying them through the liver, emptying them into the bile ducts, going through the gallbladder, through the small intestine and large intestine. And if the mycotoxins don't get packaged up into the stool for elimination, they'll get recirculated again. And this causes this never ending cycle of destruction in the lining of the intestines. And some people say that IBD, Crohn's and colitis, are not autoimmune, even though they're labeled that way. And that's actually correct, because an autoimmune means that the body is attacking itself. But in the case of IBD, the body isn't attacking anything. There is actually just chronic inflammation in the gut. And regular medicine will often say they don't know where it comes from or it's idiopathic. And if you have IBD or you suspect that you have IBD, the telltale biomarker will be elevated calprotectin in your stool. And you can get that from your doctor, you can get that from a functional practitioner, but that's the marker of inflammation in the gut that tells us that there's chronic systemic inflammation going on inside the lining of the intestines. And there's a couple of other things that I see. Sometimes we'll see retroviruses like Epstein-Barr will be a part of the clinical picture of Crohn's disease. Parasites hold on to toxins, especially like mold. A therapeutic diet is needed. So low histamine diet can be helpful. Histamines can really aggravate the gut lining. Gluten-free, dairy-free, grain-free can be very helpful because a lot of grains have mold and some of the things we talked about, glyphosate, things like that. And even corn and soy-free, again, for a lot of those same reasons. Drinking meat stock to help rebuild the tissues inside the intestinal lining. Consuming soft fruits and vegetables and cooked proteins can help the body to easily absorb nutrients because, again, the inside of the lining is super wrecked and inflamed. So it's going to need a lot of soft things to be able to digest. And we also see toxins such as like microplastics can also get deposited in the gut. And all those things combined, that's actually really the clinical picture of Crohn's disease.
And so for you, I know that you went on like an entire healing journey, but I guess, when we talk about mold or the microplastics and people might be wondering, okay, well, I had this, but like where do I even start? So I know there's that testing, but maybe just talk more about like I think I want to go two different routes, like mold, because I think, like you said, it's everywhere, but how do we know even if we're being exposed to it? And then what did it look like for you on your healing journey?
So I later on when we are chatting in this podcast, I wanted to talk a little bit more about molds and we can do that now or we can do that then. But I even said that, and I want to say that mold could be its own podcast.
Yes, I'm sure it could be.
Own podcast. And so when someone is looking to, first of all, for Crohn's disease, figure out if they have Crohn's disease or if they want to work with a practitioner, they can always work with me. They can work, with someone that they feel comfortable with. They're definitely welcome to work with their doctor to start off with. Medical doctors are not going to be mold literate, most of them. So they're not going to be aware of the fact that this is a huge issue. So this is more in the functional medicine space. So that's something also to be aware of. But as far as testing is concerned, like I said, so you can come and work with a practitioner like myself, and we can run a GI map, which will show, intestinal parasites. It'll show bacterial overgrowth. It can show H. pylori. It can show secretory IgA and inflammatory markers. It can show zonulin and anti-gliadin antibodies, and they can show calprotectin. You can also do it bioenergetically, which, like I said earlier, is much more affordable and very easy to do. And so I do that every day and help people with that. And I see a lot of people for Crohn's and colitis. So I currently have a lot of clients that we're working through. And when I say all these things, so mold mycotoxins, the retrovirus, the parasites, the therapeutic diet, the toxins, those are all things that I myself had to work through. And all of my clients that are Crohn's and colitis clients, all of them had to work through all these things.
Mhm.
So the clinical picture is very clear that a lot of this, even though we're all different people, a lot of this is very similar. Yes. So mold, like I said, we could talk about it now or we can talk about it in a little bit, whatever you would like to do.
Yeah, I think, and we can get into that. So when these clients that you're talking about who have it, do they come to you? Because I think this is also, again, the reason behind this podcast is just that education and empowering people like they have more choices. And so, have they already been diagnosed with Crohn's and they're coming to you like, I know there has to be something different. Can you just talk through a little bit more about that of like, how are you having? What are the results that they're getting?
Right. So I have both. I have both clients who were already diagnosed. They might be on some immunosuppressive medication. So that's what a lot of us are put on for both IBD and also autoimmune. So some kind of immunosuppressant like Humira, methotrexate, something like that. I currently have current clients right now who I'm not a medical doctor, so I can't diagnose you, but I do know a lot about these things. And so when you come to me with these symptoms, I can help support you. And so we're working through some things with different people who weren't officially diagnosed, but are showing for all these clinical presentations. And so we're walking through that together and helping them. Either way, whatever works best for people, whatever feels good for people. If someone who's listening to this podcast now is interested, reach out to me. And then I can also direct you to where I feel is best. If I think like, oh, yeah, you should definitely go see an enterologist, then I would suggest that. If I think like, oh, this is something we can definitely take care of in the office, I would suggest come see me. Or if I think like a different practitioner in town would be better, then I would refer them to them.
So the next thing that I wanted to talk through today was the word I can't pronounce. So maybe you can tell me that because I think it's the least familiar of our three listeners today. So the like ankylosing, am I getting that right?
Yes, you are.
Spondylitis. Okay. What is that? What was it doing to your body? And what did it eventually lead to?
Yeah. So AS or ankylosing spondylitis falls under the spondyloarthritis umbrella of autoimmunity. So they're inflammatory rheumatic diseases that cause arthritis. Unlike other types of arthritis like rheumatoid arthritis, it primarily affects the spine. So it
Mhm.
affects the spine, the pelvic joints, and the antices, which are the areas of the body that are the connective areas, the ligaments and the tendons that attach to bone. And so I was eventually diagnosed with AS after many, many years of back and hip pain. And one of the defining symptoms of AS is when pain gets worse at night. So I used to not be able to sleep because the pain was so bad I couldn't roll over in bed. So I used to describe to other people that my spine was on fire because that's really what it felt like. So I would go totally depleted all day long to lay down for bedtime and then have my pain come on stronger at night. And when I was diagnosed finally, and they diagnosed me because so I went to a rheumatologist and they diagnosed me by looking at my spine. And what had happened was, so eventually with AS, if you don't get it under control, your entire spine can fuse and you
Whoa.
could be in a wheelchair. So already when they diagnosed me, they looked at my spine and my SI joints. So that's the bottom, that's like the tail part of your spine, are all fused. So the discs in between them are gone. And so, and thankfully, I mean, I was youngish. I was in my 30s. I mean, imagine if it would have gone on longer. It is not a very good disease to live with. But some of the things that helped me that I want to talk to you about is, so if someone has AS, a lot of times they have HLA-B27, which is a gene that specifically would push them towards that diagnosis. But not everyone has HLA-B27. I don't. I don't have HLA-B27, but I have ankylosing spondylitis, which is also common. And a lot of people in the autoimmune spectrum and other things like MCAS, mast cell activation, SIRS, a lot of inflammatory conditions have the HLA genes, which means we have specific variants, HLA-DR, HLA-DQ, which prevents our bodies from detoxing properly. And so you may have also heard of like the MTHFR gene, and that prevents the body from methylating properly. And so a lot of that can contribute to holding on to a lot of toxins, which thus causes a lot of chronic inflammation. So when I had AS, I have AS, I like to think of myself as not having those autoimmunes anymore. But the first thing that I did was use a therapeutic diet. And therapeutic diets are really, I'm very passionate about them because food is extremely important for healing. And so, for an ankylosing spondylitis patient, using a starch free model of eating, actually, for me, that completely took away all my pain. So, when I first started learning about therapeutic diets, I learned about the starch free diet for ankylosing spondylitis. And so, I applied it to my life. And within 2 weeks, my pain was gone, completely gone, zero pain.
Were
And
you kind of mind blown?
it was life changing. It was absolutely life changing. And for me, if you go to my website or if you read about my mission, you'll see that for me, food is the basis for everything that I do. Every single thing that I do. It's the cheapest, it's the most fun, and I help people through finding ways to navigate it so it doesn't feel restrictive, especially if you're using a therapeutic diet or food protocol. So, starch free is very important for people in the spondyloarthritis umbrella. I also wanted to talk about with AS, there are secondary pathologies that can occur, like osteoarthritis. So, that's where the degeneration of my hip cartilage came in. So, I live with two prosthetic hips. So, I don't have any cartilage in my hips anymore. And now I have two titanium hips replacements because my body attacked itself so much from the osteoarthritis. And other things that I also struggled with. And again, I share this with you because if somebody is experiencing this or struggling with this, it's important to know this because it took me a long time to get a diagnosis. And typically for autoimmunity, it can take 8 to 10 years for a diagnosis, which is really a shame. that people should be in pain for that long and there should be that much joint damage before somebody can get a diagnosis. But that is the case in our world today. I experienced costochondritis, which is again that inflammation of the connective intercostal tissue of the rib cage. I also experienced air hunger with that, where I couldn't get a full deep breath. And I actually went to the emergency room multiple times for that, and nobody could tell me what was going on until later I found out that that was actually underlying Bartonella, which is a Lyme infection and mold toxicity that was causing that. Dactylitis is another secondary pathology where your joints of your fingers and toes can puff up, and uveitis or iritis, which is inflammation of the eye. All of those are signals of systemic inflammation. So if anybody listening is having any struggles with those, this could be possibly a connection to autoimmunity. And so that would be something to ask your rheumatologist or your doctor about.
So, and I don't know, clearly, I don't know a lot about arthritis, but I feel like for the normal person who doesn't know a lot about it, it's just like talked about as arthritis. So clearly there's a lot of different kinds. And I know it does also run in my family. There are several people that have arthritis, but like, what does that mean? Or are there ways that they can work with it? Or does it really depend on the type of arthritis?
So, arthritis medically, like the medical term arthritis, literally just means inflammation of the joints. So, if you were to break it apart, itis at the end of any medical word means inflammation. And then arthritis, the arth part, that is the inflammation of the joints, the joint. And so, yes, osteoarthritis is the common arthritis that everybody knows about. As you get older, you might develop osteoarthritis. That's when there's just a little bit of joint degeneration over time from age or wear or things like that. We see in our office a lot of reasons under the surface. They could be pathogens, they could be Lyme, they could be parasites. There are reasons why the body is having issues with the joints, but we know arthritis to be just inflammation of the joint tissue. I think you're right. I think depending on, someone who has osteoarthritis, I don't think that everybody has to go gluten free, which is honestly, crazy for someone who's celiac and someone who sees a ton of people who are gluten free that can improve the quality of their lives. I also have equally as many clients who don't need to go gluten free, who are also improving the quality of their lives and are very healthy. So I don't think that everybody who has arthritis has to be gluten free, for example, or change their diet. But I do think that everybody could benefit from not eating as many processed foods, not eating as much sugar, not drinking as much alcohol, maybe looking at food labels and not, being aware of all the food additives, just simply changing that and not eating out so much and eating at home could improve pain and inflammation inside a person's body. And then from there, depending on the arthritis that you have, yes, it probably is more personalized as to what your therapeutic diet would be.
And I guess I don't know why I didn't think of to look at it like that because a lot of their response is like, well, it shows in the x-ray, it's just bone on bone, right? So there's nothing I can essentially do about it. Is that true? Is that not true?
So it depends on how much damage there is. So if it truly is bone on bone, and so for my case, I was a candidate for a hip surgery. And for me, that was a really very important time in my health journey because I had no range of motion. It was all gone. And so for me, having a hip surgery was life changing. If somebody has some joint damage, it is possible that they could, improve the quality of their joints by consuming collagen, glucosamine, gelatin from the inside of bones, both from bone broth, and you can also get powdered gelatin, colostrum, which also helps, L-glutamine, which helps to repair the tissues in the joints and in the lining of our intestines. So that you could consume a lot of connective tissue from animals. So there's a lot of things you can do to help rebuild bone, rebuild joints, rebuild cartilage. But I would say if someone has a lot of joint damage, I mean, that's where it kind of crosses the line where I'm not a doctor and I'm not an orthopedic
No.
surgeon. But that would be something where you would have a discussion with your orthopedic surgeon about, are you candidate for that? Is that something? But, I honestly have to tell you that that's why I always tell people that I am not against the conventional medicine model. I'm kind of like stuck in between both now, which is a good place to be because permanently now I have titanium hips. So now I have to constantly be aware of infections. I can't get an infection because if I get an infection, it'll go right to my hip replacements. So sometimes I have to use an antibiotic, even though I maybe don't want to. So there are things that I have to do personally, or like if someone has thyroid disease and they have to have their thyroid removed, they might be on levothyroxine or Synthroid for the rest of their lives, even if they don't want to, because they have to. So there are modern diseases that we develop because of the modern world that we live in. And sometimes we have to use both conventional medicine and natural medicine, and that's okay. In fact, that's the magic sauce, is being able to use both to be the very best people that we can be.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you for sharing. I think that's always helpful. So
Yeah.
let's get into of those on top of the three autoimmune conditions. You had also mentioned the mold, or yes, the mold toxicity, Lyme's disease, POTS, and SIBO. I think all at once or late over time. How did you untangle all of that? And I know for me, like Lyme is a big one right now because my husband and my son just did the bioscan, which I think is the bioenergetics that you're talking about. And it showed Lyme's present in both of them. And so we're working with some supplements to heal that. But I'd love to hear more from your perspective on like what you're seeing with that too.
Yes, this is such a great question. And it's an important one for those people who are listening in, because I truly believe that autoimmunity is a toxicity disease. It is not, and this is going to sound radical, a disease where the body is attacking itself,
Mhm.
like we have been led to believe. And I'm going to explain why. But our bodies are amazing healers, and our bodies know so much more than we give them credit for. And so, for most chronic illnesses and dis-ease, not just autoimmunity, but diabetes, cardiovascular disease, metabolic issues, which 50% of America is struggling with right now, PCOS, PMOS, anxiety, depression, autism, and even cancer, there is a reason under the surface why our body is reacting that way. It's not just genetics. So, your diagnosis is definitely not your destiny, and it's not your identity. And so many of us have been told that we will have to live with this for the rest of our lives. So, there is this study of epigenetics, which is the study of how genes interact with the environment around us. The human genome was fully mapped out in the early 2000s, and yet still we have chronic disease epidemics that are increasing. So, it's not just our genes, it's something else. And
Mhm.
so what I went through as I was healing through my autoimmunes was all of this under the surface toxicity. So mold, parasites, heavy metals, chemicals, Lyme, bacterial overgrowth. These were all culprits that my body was just simply responding to. So it wasn't actually attacking me. It was trying to tell me that there was something going on under the surface. So this manifested into POTS, which is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And POTS is a chronic disorder of the autonomic nervous system, which is the part of the body that protects you and governs the subconscious. So it's characterized by excessive increase in heart rate and symptoms like dizziness and lightheadedness, especially when a person transitions from like laying and sitting down to standing upright. And a lot of times I would feel these symptoms when I would get even a little bit nervous.
Mhm.
So it affected
Interesting.
my ability to speak, and it affected my ability to perform in other people. And to this day, my nervous system is very sensitive. And so I cannot consume caffeine without getting very nauseated, although that has gotten better with time and healing. And mold toxicity, as we talked about, this is a really, really, really important one. And I have to say, I was the biggest naysayer when it comes to learning about mold. But sometimes we are the most resistant to the things we must learn and grow from.
Yes, yes.
Mold is very dangerous for our health, and we can get mold toxicity from water damaged buildings, from previous leaks that aren't remediated properly. Mold can be in our food system, mold can be in our tap water. The thing about mold, to be to be really cognizant of is we don't have to have fear around mold because it can be very scary. And so, if somebody is interested in learning about like cheap ways to remedy a mold situation, cheap ways to clean their air, resources and things like that, please reach out to me because I have lots of guides and resources that I share with my clients. Because when we find out that they have some kind of mold toxicity, that's usually one of the first things that the body wants to work on. And it's a learning experience too, because we need to clean the environment. We need to figure out, is this a current mold exposure? Is it an old mold exposure? Is it both? And that's really important to bring down the toxic burden. So, yeah. So, if anybody ever has any questions, please email me. I have seen mold in every autoimmune case to date. So, every autoimmune client that I've worked with has had a mold situation. Lyme and its co-infections, like we talked about, is another important biotoxin that can contribute to the immune system going on high alert. And that would be because of Lyme's. And that is exactly what happens. Lyme and its co-infections are so tricky and can cause what's called the cell danger response across the whole entire body. And Lyme can consist of a very toxic pathogenic soup. So we have like Borrelia, Bartonella, Babesia, Ehrlichia, Anaplasmosis, Powassan virus, Rocky Mountain fever, alpha-gal, just to name a few. And this is not to scare, but it is to spread awareness that Wisconsin is a hotbed for this. And we know this because if you've been following along on social media lately or the news, the ticks are pretty bad this year and they continue to be a tricky problem when it gets nice outside. So all the more reason to be prepared with tick spray, non-toxic tick spray, clothing coverings, do regular tick checks before you come inside. And it's important to note also that ticks are not the only vectors of the diseases. They can also be spread by mosquitoes.
Interesting. Because I think for me, the question is like, we never saw a tick on him, which makes sense. I mean, a lot of them are tiny, but like, how long has it been there? And the biggest question that I keep getting, I'd say from family too, is like, well, Lyme's is really serious. He should be on antibiotics because we're just trying the herbal route and the supplements and food as well. So do you want to share more on that as well?
Yep. So we work with Lyme cases all the time. So I, own Belly Love Holistic Wellness, but I also work at Family Tree Nutritional Health and Wellness. So we do a lot there with bioenergetic testing, muscle testing, nutrition response testing. I do functional lab testing there, nutritional therapy. So anybody can come in. We have a lot of affordable services. And so we have a lot of really great ways to find Lyme. People come in all the time for working on Lyme and its co-infections. And so we see a lot of times, unfortunately, so two things. Number one, if somebody has a current Lyme exposure and they go into the doctors will usually give them like a 21-day antibiotic treatment. And sometimes it can work if it is mostly Borrelia. But a lot of times it's not just Borrelia. A lot of times when you get a tick bite, it is going to be this mix of toxic soup that I was talking about. And Borrelia is a bacterial form, but there are many other forms of these co-infections. Some of them are parasitic. Some of them are viral. Some of them are a mixture of all of it together. And so by just using an antibiotic, sometimes, and again, this is from my perspective as a functional practitioner, not a medical doctor. So this is important to know. But sometimes the antibiotic can actually make the Lyme hide
Mm.
and go further and deeper into your tissues. And then it becomes more of a chronic problem. So, because the antibiotic is so strong and because Lyme is so tricky and it's a survival microorganism, it will often burrow deeper into the tissues and will come out later in life. So, you might be able to get rid of some of it, but then it's never really truly gone. And then it comes out and flares in other ways, right? I'm not saying that antibiotics couldn't be helpful, and a combination between herbal supplements and antibiotics could be a good plan. Again, working with your doctor and your practitioner. But yep, we also use herbal supplements, tinctures as well. And we have a really accurate way of determining exactly which of the co infections is going on, where they are in your body, and testing those frequencies so we can help people get them out.
Okay. That's super helpful because I also know, a couple of people who have continued over the last, gosh, it's probably like 3 years, like keep going back on the antibiotics for this Lyme. And like, that's also scares me a little bit because something deeper is going on and it's not helping. So I think the way you explain it kind of helps know that like maybe it's just like suppressing it, hiding it, and it comes back out.
Yeah.
And do you see a lot of those cases as well?
Yeah, we do.
And so how do you help with that? Or is it really through finding out what that co-infection is and then through food and through tinctures and supplements?
Yes. So I think it's important to know with Lyme and with anything that we're talking about today that the terrain and fortifying the terrain of the body is essential to healing. So Louis Pasteur, and when first medicine was developed the germ theory, which is a lot of what our medical model is based off of. You have a germ, it makes you sick, you diagnose it, you treat it, you get it out. But then there's this other way of thinking called the terrain theory, which is that if you fortify the body and you make it strong and you support the immune system with good food, good rest, stress resiliency, love, joy, reducing toxins, making sure you get sunlight, connecting with nature, all of those things are going to help fortify your body so that you can fight these infections. So the stronger you are as a person, the better it's going to be. And so you might find someone who ends up having Lyme frequencies in their body, but maybe it never really affects them, or it affects them far less than somebody else. And so that plays into that whole idea of each person is very different. Each clinical presentation is very different. You could have two people with the same things that show up, but they're going to present differently. So the best thing that you can do is do all of those foundational things that again I'm so passionate about, the nourishing the food, eating whole foods, making sure you're spending time with loved ones, slowing down, boundaries, moving your body, getting good quality sleep, keeping your stress down, drinking good quality water, connecting with the sun and nature, grounding. Those things will all help you work to heal some of these really serious infections that are in the body.
That brings me to wanting to talk about that food first, because that's really what you love at Belly Love Holistic. And so I know that's a passion of yours. Before we go into that, something you said in the beginning is that you say you're not in full remission. And so when you say that, what does that really mean for you and for your day-to-day life?
Yeah. So living a life free of autoimmunity has taught me so much. Being in remission means listening to my body, putting myself first, setting boundaries, saying no, resting, not caving into peer pressures of modern society, praying, enjoying slowing down, spending quality time with family and friends, moving my body in ways that feel good, cooking nourishing food, journaling, reading, learning how to be a better light in this world. It is not about being perfect. It is knowing that there will be ups and downs, but that is what being human is all about. Freeing myself from the labels, the identity of autoimmunity, working on deep traumas and balancing my nervous system. All of these is what it means to be in remission.
Thank you. And I think just hearing that too, there may be listeners out there struggling with some of those autoimmunities, thinking that is their identity and that is their label and something they have to live with. But you're living proof that there are other ways and things that you can do to start feeling better and living a life of joy. So thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
Okay, so let's move into food. Your approach is food first. You've shared that. And for someone who we've talked about, like their condition is genetic, maybe then told they're irreversible. Why does food matter so much? And I know that you've shared like what it can do for you personally that medicine alone can't do.
Yeah, so this is where my passion really comes in because, as I mentioned earlier, this was the first place that I truly felt empowered in my life. And this was the first time that I really was able to get a handle on my chronic inflammation. So I want everyone listening to know that whether you're on a little bit of medication or a lot of bit of medication or no medication at all, food is everything. Sometimes, because we live in a modern world, we have modern diseases, and not everyone has the means to work on the deepest of root causes. Not everyone can move out and remediate a moldy house. Not everyone has the ability to leave their stressful job or abusive relationship. Not everyone can pay the money for root cause practitioners with lots of testing and supplement protocols, which is why, and imagine that I am clapping my hands in between each word. A therapeutic diet is the single most powerful and effective needle that you can move in your healing journey.
Mm.
So you're eating food regardless. So you might as well have it work to your advantage.
Yes, yes, 100%.
And of course, have it taste freaking delicious as well. So at this point in my functional nutrition career, I have seen hundreds of clients, and every single one of them has moved the needle the farthest with food. So I could have a client on 20 supplements, and the minute that they change their food therapeutically in honor of their condition, their inflammation improves and the need for supplementation goes down, and their biomarkers on their labs normalize. And they start to have energy to create and learn and grow. And they naturally start thinking about working out and moving their body in a way that feels good. And they start sleeping better, which gives them more energy to heal. And all of this comes from food. In the simplest form, you don't need to get organic, grass fed, pasture raised, wild caught food. Many Americans are eating fast food every single day. Have you seen the TikTok and Instagram reels of the accounts where people are eating and eating and eating processed food and they wonder where is the food noise coming from in their heads? Yet eventually, when we learn more, we do more. So eventually, if a person gets a handle on eating whole, real food, then we can start learning about food criteria like organic and grass fed, which are very important. But if a person is transitioning from eating a Pop Tart every day for breakfast to eating eggs for breakfast, I'd rather they focus on that than if the egg is pasture raised or not. I am a functional nutritional therapy practitioner, board certified in holistic nutrition. So I focus on nutritional therapies and therapeutic diets to heal. This could be the AIP diet, paleo, GAPS, specific carbohydrate diet, gluten free, dairy free, grain free, for example, as a basis for healing. This doesn't mean a person will be on this healing food protocol forever, but it can drastically bring down inflammation in the gut and help their whole body to heal. And it's important to remember to give yourself grace. We are not looking to develop an eating disorder. We are looking to see this as food freedom, the freedom to love our body and make the best choices given the circumstances. And I always love the quote that Dr. Will Cole says: choosing to eat foods that don't love us back repeatedly is like staying in a toxic relationship and wondering why we're still miserable.
And as I think that leads me into my next question, that you work a lot with people, not just what they're eating, but their relationship with food, right? And how they feel about eating. So, why is that piece so important, especially for people who have been sick for a long time and even some who are just, trying to figure it out right now?
Yeah. So when I was first in school to become a nutritionist, I thought I wanted to become a dietitian. So I started taking classes to collect enough prerequisite credits to be eligible for a master's in dietetics. And I appreciate that time in my journey so much because I took a lot of science classes: anatomy and physiology, microbiology, organic chemistry, medical terminology, advanced clinical nutrition. But during that time, I also wanted to start helping people right away. So I went to get my integrative and holistic health coaching certificate as well. And this was the program that really started to change the entire course of my life. So here I learned that even though you might know the science of nutrition, that doesn't mean that you're going to be a successful practitioner helping people change their habits and their mindset. Most people know what they have to do. It's a matter of actually doing it, which is the hardest part. And that comes down to many things. Unfortunately, a lot of it has been steeped into our society and it has to be unlearned in order to truly heal. So, in my programs, I teach clients to count nutrients, not calories. For example, I help them get out of the deprivative mindset of portion control, weighing their body constantly, and appetite suppression, and actually help them to live vibrant, healthy lives. So we talk about how our food relationship is complicated and has our inner child to look after, and often is one of the longest relationships we'll have on this earth. Longer than our parents, longer than our children, our partners, and our friends. And I teach a lot about body positivity because the outside of the body does not always determine health. There are a lot of shapes and sizes, and many healthy people are in different bodies. It is not our job to place judgment on someone else's story. And honestly, as a curvy person who now is absorbing my nutrients, my body is very happy. And when I was at my skinniest, and according to societal standards, looked my healthiest, I was actually at my sickest. So, this is why healing our relationship with food is paramount, especially if we are going to be changing our food habits for the betterment of our health.
Mm. And I think that right there, just that end part that you said is important too, right? Because I think we do place so much judgment and not only on ourselves, but maybe others, or you have to look a certain way. And I think that's just how society has programmed us to be. And especially now with the TikTok and the Instagram and all the things. But having that relationship with food can be huge. And so I know that here in our community in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin, you run cooking classes, and it's looks like you just received a grant to really help bring your vision of a fully celiac safe space to life. So tell us more about that. Why are you building it? What's your why behind it all?
Yes, I am very excited and I love running cooking classes. And we are building an inclusive community around food here in the Chippewa Valley and beyond. And yes, thank you. I was truly shocked and I am honored to be a recipient of the Red Letter Grant for 2026. What am I building? That's a good question. I don't know. If I'm being honest, I just don't know, but I know it's going to be something big. And I'm trying to just take the next right step. So I have framed a framed picture in my office that says, "You are exactly in the right place."
Oh, I love that.
So I would love a space where people can come from everywhere to find a celiac safe eating experience where all the food is safe and all my cooking classes are dairy free as well. And I always encourage if someone has like a soy or corn allergy or sensitivity or any other food sensitivity to let me know so we can accommodate because nobody deserves to sit out at the table of life. I have been there many times, and all too often we are advocating for ourselves, which is fine. It's a fine skill to learn. But sometimes we are tired and we just want to come home to find some place where we belong, where we can be taken care of. And the Happy Belly Foodies cooking classes and experiences are an opportunity for family and friends to come together to learn the skills to make delicious, high quality, nourishing food that is good for your belly and body, no matter what you can or cannot eat, and enjoy the pleasures of life. I love traveling the world and trying new foods and new restaurants. And since the day I was diagnosed, I never wanted to give up being a foodie. So I didn't. And I created a space where all could still enjoy food in a safe and inclusive way.
And so I think for someone listening today, like this could maybe sound overwhelming of where do I even start with food? And like you said, a lot of people are eating fast food weekly, daily, grabbing things that might be easy but not necessarily healthy. And like there's a lot of noise out there. So where can someone start to not make it feel overwhelming?
I think the best thing they can do is start in their home. So, one of the best things we can do is just start cooking at home. And it could just be like if you're running throughout the week and you're really big cook, maybe just try one meal a week. Just baby steps. Just try one thing. Or maybe try to make your breakfast at home. That's another thing. And a lot of people aren't really eating breakfast right now. And that's one of the best things they can do for their blood sugar and their energy and their inflammation and their health and their hormones. But maybe just try, if you like eggs, just try cooking an egg. A lot of times we talk about you drive through a drive through and it takes a long time to sit there and wait for your food and then it's expensive. Instead, what if you just like you put an egg in a pan and it literally is ready in like 5 seconds? So, I mean, just try to make the shift to try to cook some things at home. And if you're not really big at cooking, try to think about what were some of those recipes that you remember from growing up. that you really loved, something that you have a really special memory and an emotion tied to it, and see if you can recreate it at home. And maybe that will be the shift that you need, the spark that you need to start you down a road to healing and a healthy lifestyle.
Yes, because cooking can be fun. And I know that there are also people in my life who skip breakfast and I'm like, it's so important. Can you share, like, maybe what does a good breakfast look like? That could also be easy.
Yeah. I always tell my clients fiber, fat, protein, fiber, fat, protein, fiber, fat, protein. So we always need some kind of like fiber. So, and that could be a lot for a lot of my grain free people. Like we don't eat a whole lot of like toast and bread and things like that. So honestly, I like to get vegetables in almost every time that I eat, or you could get some fruits in. Both of those would be fiber. So you could do for a breakfast, honestly, I mean, there's all kinds of things. On a weeknight, you could do like a little egg cup that you've pre-made and has some, sauteed veggies in it. And then that would also have the fat and the protein already in it. And you could take that on the go. You could make like a chia seed pudding or overnight oats for people who are fine with oats. Make sure you get a gluten-free oat if you're gluten-free. Make sure you get an organic oat, maybe a glyphosate-free oat if you're not gluten-free. But you can make those, and those are easy to grab on the go. I like to also put some to add protein. I like to use quality protein powder in my chia seed puddings or my overnight oats to increase the protein content. If you don't want to use protein powder, you could do like a Greek yogurt, would be fun too, because those have like 20 grams of protein in it. So those would be some fast breakfasts on a weekend. I honestly, my husband and I love to make egg bowls. So we saute up a bunch of veggies. So like asparagus, broccoli. We love to take some mixed greens and put that on the side. And then he loves to, and in fact, we just had this last night for dinner. He loves to cut up like a chicken sausage and saute it in the pan and then make some eggs alongside of it.
And actually, because it's now summer. And so I'm working on independence with our boys and helping them to learn like how to be more independent. And so I've started, like, I made an egg bake. So Sunday I made an egg bake that they can just cut a piece and throw it in the microwave to warm it up. And I cut up spinach and kale really, really small. So I just call it seasoning and other veggies to go in there too. And they love it. And it's something that they can have fun doing by themselves, but something that's easy to grab because I know mornings can be hectic and chaos. And we are very fortunate to not have to like rush out of the house in the morning during summer, but it still makes life a little easier when I can prep things ahead of time and it can have all those nutrients in it. Okay, so I know again, we could probably keep going 100%. What are any final words that maybe questions I haven't asked or things you want to make sure the listeners know if they're struggling or even if they just want to start down a healthier lifestyle?
Yeah. So I know that the human body is truly miraculous and has the ability to heal. And listening to your intuition is really important always. So if you think something is off, it is, period. If you aren't getting answers from one provider, try another practitioner, try a different way. One important thing I make sure to share with all my clients that's been important for my healing journey, and I constantly remind myself this all the time, is release the timeline.
Mhm.
Healing does not have a timeline. The state of dis-ease means imbalance, and it means that we are out of alignment with ourselves. We are not in homeostasis. And the healing journey is not always easy. It allows our life to take twists and turns. But if we let it, it will carve out an amazing journey and an amazing legacy with vibrant experiences of richness and pleasure. I always remember what it was like to take life and food for granted. I could go to any restaurant, any grocery store, and get any food I wanted: pasta, cakes, cookies, croissants, breads, crackers, pizza, sushi. But what I didn't understand is the craftsmanship that went into them, the tending to the land, the caring for Mother Earth, the hard work it takes to grow and harvest our food, the extreme artisanship and artistry and time it takes to create foods and dishes we are eating at convenience. And when my life changed, my appreciation for food and this earth and my body changed with it for the better. So I would never change the trajectory of my life. I would never give up what I've gone through for a different life because it has made this life so much better and so much richer. And I am so much more appreciative of everything because of my autoimmune journey.
I'm sure, like, I know we had talked in the beginning, just getting emotional listening to that because you have went through a lot and what you've gone through. And now on the other side, you still have a whole life ahead of you. And how beautiful that you get to enjoy it and not be in constant pain and teach others how to do the same. So I just think that's pretty amazing that you get to share your gifts. And I hope that our listeners today, if they learned anything at all, is just start with food and really figure out how can you start changing your relationship with food and what you're eating, because as you said, not everybody can afford to go to a practitioner or to buy the organic or to do the things. But if we look at the money we're spending on other things or just the time and energy and pain, food is an easy way to just make a big change. So thank you, Tammie, so much. If people want to listen to or find you, learn more, come get some testing done, where can they find you?
Yes. So you can go to my website, bellyloveholisticwellness.com. You can email me at tammiedelveaux@gmail.com. And from there, like I said, I can share with you my different services that I offer, whether that be cooking classes, which are the most affordable. You can go for a one-time cooking class and learn a lot just from that one experience. You can come see me at the different clinics that I work at. You can work with me on foods and food relationship and therapeutic diets. So there's a lot of different options that I have to support you with. So reach out.
Amazing. Thank you, Tammie. I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being here today. I hope this episode gave you something you needed, whether that's a new perspective, a resource to explore, or just the reminder that you're not alone in this journey. And if today's episode spoke to you, tag me on Instagram, share with a friend, leave a review. That's how we build stronger, healthier communities together. One practitioner, one story, one family at a time. So see you next week. And if you're a natural health and wellness practitioner with a story to tell, I'd love to connect. You can find me at practitionersrise.com.